Hello and welcome to Taking Care of Business. I'm Mario Toneguzzi. Joining me today is Laura Jones, who is Executive Vice President of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Laura, you guys put out an interesting report today about red tape. So how much is red tape costing Canadian small business owners?
The short answer is a lot. The more technical answer is regulation costs about $40 billion a year in Canada, and about $11 billion of that is red tape, or the unnecessary part. So like taxes, we wouldn't argue the optimal amount of regulation is zero or the optimal amount of taxes is zero. But, at some point you want to pay attention if the load gets too heavy. And so we call that kind of unnecessary part of it, the red tape burden. Those are those forms that are overly complicated, or the delays that are unnecessary, or the rules that are conflicting. That kind of thing is all in the red tape category.
So the part of the study looked at comparison to what's happening south of us. And in the US, the red tape burden was what, $167.5 billion. On a comparative basis, what do you take out of that? And, is Canada less or is Canada more?
So we did this study. Every year we do a Red Tape Awareness Week to put a spotlight on the issues of regulation and red tape. And we did this study in partnership with a group out of the US and with support from Intuit, who's got a real interest in some of the public policy issues that we deal with that affect small business. And we found something really surprising this year. So we did this back in 2013, and I don't think anyone was too surprised to see that Canadian businesses of most sizes were paying more in regulatory costs than the US businesses of the same size. This year, the result has flipped, and actually Canadian businesses are paying less than those in the US. Now, this isn't something that we should get our pom-poms out about just yet, because it's not because the costs have been reduced in Canada. Our costs have been relatively stable. They've increased a bit, but in the US, the costs have increased a lot. So that's why we have that result. So both countries have work to do on regulatory modernization and reducing red tape, but now the costs by size of business are lower in Canada than the US.
Well, let's not also, beyond the cost is the time involved, right? And I found this interesting, that the average is 677 hours from the Canadian business owners to deal with red tape and paperwork and all that stuff. And US, it's 889 hours. That's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time. When we put that in days, you're talking about, you're not talking about weeks, you're talking about months in terms of regulatory compliance for the average business. And so it is a lot of time. And as we emerge from the pandemic, I think governments at all levels are going to be looking at how can they support small business? What can they do in terms of what policy levers can they pull? What can they pay attention to make things easier for businesses? And reducing red tape is one of those win-wins. I missed that long, complicated form, said no one ever. And yes. So when you get rid of these rules, you're not hurting people, you're actually giving people back time and money to invest in more interesting and productive things. So we ask business owners, what would you do if you had more time and money as a result of reducing unnecessary rules? And, they talk about creating jobs, they talk about giving their employees a raise, they talk about lowering prices for customers, they talk about investing in new equipment and becoming more productive. So these are all things that we'd like to see, and we'd like to see at the best of times. But as we know, small business is not in the best of times right now. One of the disturbing findings of the report actually is that, so not surprisingly, 9 out of 10 small businesses in both countries are saying, yes, please, government, make this a priority. But one of the disturbing things is there's a sense of hopelessness that government will make it a priority. So depending on the level of government in Canada, you only have between 15 and 24% of businesses saying, yeah, and we think governments will do that they'll make it a priority. So we've got some work to do in terms of building confidence on this file.
And in regards to that, I see in the study that 87% of the small business owners in Canada, and 84 in the US think that there's excessive government regulations out there, which leads to the next point and the next stat, which I find the most disturbing, is that 63% of Canadian small business owners would not advise their children to start a business.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah, and given the state of regulation, that's right. Almost 2/3 of Canadians are saying, "I would tell my kids don't do it." That was kind of an interesting question for us to get at. How easy is it going to be for the next generation of entrepreneurs to get into the game? And we have to remember that there are a lot of rules that businesses have to comply with today that didn't exist 30 years ago. Now, some of that, of course, is good. It's added to our environmental protection, our safety protection. But to the extent that we're also adding unnecessary rules that are causing people to think twice about going into business and maybe saying, I'm not going to do it, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem for us going forward, and something I think we have to take very seriously.
Okay, today was the launch of Red Tape Awareness Week. Laura, tell me what is on tap for the rest of the week.
Yeah, happy Red Tape Awareness Week. So tomorrow we are releasing our Golden Scissors Award. So this is sort of like the red carpet for red tape, for reducing red tape, and kind of a fun thing we do to recognize some of the interesting initiatives that are going on. We're not only here to sort of critique governments and nudge them into, we're also here to applaud and say, hey, we want more of that. And so we've got a couple of really interesting ones that we're rewarding tomorrow. I'm excited about that. And then Thursday is report card day. So we grade all of the provinces and we look at how are they doing in terms of measuring and reporting and being accountable with respect to red tape. But also we have a new section of the report card where we look at burden. So, who are the heavyweights and who maybe is doing a good job at keeping red tape in check. I mean, everyone has more work to do, but some are in better shape than others. So we look at that on Thursday.
All right, super. And something tells me we'll be chatting again on Thursday.
I hope so. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura, for joining us today. That was Laura Jones, who is Executive Vice President of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. I'm Mario Toneguzzi. This has been Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.